Welcome to Marketplace Live. Let's defy gravity.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. First, Congressman Langevin, thank you for your service, especially for the progress we're making in cybersecurity. And again, thanks to your leadership, your prioritization, and expertise in this critical and evolving area. So everyone, I'm Erich Sanchack. I'm the EVP of Operations for Digital Realty. And I thought I'd share a few perspectives to help calibrate us prior to our conversation with the Congressman today. Digital Realty supports the world-leading enterprises and service providers by delivering a full spectrum of data center, co-location, and interconnection solutions. Its global footprint supports more than 4,000 customers across 280 facilities in 49 metros, 24 countries across 6 continents. Clients range from cloud service providers to IT service providers, communication companies, social networking to financial services, as well as manufacturing and healthcare, among many, many others. And cybersecurity is always top of our mind to our business as we provide physical and logical security to our customers across the globe 24/7. And our customers are facing an influx of challenges in data storage. Data is growing exponentially, and it's driven by automation, the Internet of Things, and as data accrues, it creates significant challenges for today's IT infrastructure. The accumulation of data has a magnetic effect, which tends to also attract additional services and applications, creating data gravity, causing complexity, and in some cases, even putting the brakes on digital transformation. We've recently conducted an in-depth research into the concept of data gravity. We see the gravitational effect on large bodies of data as the single biggest challenge facing companies today, preventing them from having the flexibility and agility needed to digitally transform. To address this, businesses need to modernize their infrastructure. It's got to be designed from the ground up to handle large data volumes. It needs to support the influx of information from a growing number of users, the locations, the clouds, and the networks. And with the advent of 5G, edge computing, Internet of Things, analyst groups are predicting that the majority of data will actually be created outside of traditional data means. So understanding and protecting the new life cycle of data creation, migration, and analysis is critical to architecting successfully for the future. Overcoming data gravity barriers also requires a network footprint that creates centers of data exchange and allowing traffic to be aggregated and maintained via private or public clouds. And that's at the core or at the edge or for every point of business presence. A modernized infrastructure lessens data gravity barriers by accommodating distributed workflows, solving for global coverage, integrating physical and virtual worlds, and interconnecting to digital ecosystems. We are proud to provide Platform Digital to our customers, which is the culmination of more than 15 years of innovation. Based on analyzing hundreds of our customer deployments around the world, we've defined best practices, standard deployment models that address network, data, and security footprints and will allow us to accelerate deployment times for customers globally. It provides the global data center platform to host critical infrastructure and interconnect digital communities of interest, providing a trusted foundation to solve global coverage, capacities, and communities of interest, their connectivity needs with a single data center provider. Now, as the world quickly transitioned to a remote workforce or business force, the stress on IT infrastructure increased dramatically. Data centers emerged as critical resources for keeping our digital economy running. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security and many other governments around the world categorized the data center resources as essential resources during the restricted or lockdown time periods. COVID demonstrated the need for a stable infrastructure that could support our economy during turbulent times. The pandemic stressed the need to accelerate enterprise digital transformation efforts to ensure business continuity and preparedness for future uncertainty. The data center industry has a responsibility to keep our critical infrastructure up and running, especially because they support the technologies we rely on so heavily today, to include video conferencing like we are using today, and entertainment and streaming and much, much more. The pandemic is causing organizations to reevaluate their priorities and budgets, but the path towards digital business still remains a big focus. COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of modernizing the legacy systems to drive innovation, and more businesses are realizing that the ability to operate ubiquitously on demand will require delivery to our customers' needs. Organizations must move away from centralized infrastructure strategy and more towards decentralization so that companies can address coverage, capacity, and connectivity needs. Platform Digital helps them accomplish these goals in a controlled and trusted ecosystem. At Digital Realty, we value information sharing and partnerships and regularly engage with the community, law enforcement, and other members of the cybersecurity community. We have a particular emphasis with elected officials to make sure that our corporate policies and governance is in a shared partnership and dialogue. This is why we really value the conversation such as this one today. We are delighted to have you here with us today, Congressman. You have had a very distinguished career serving as a member of the House Armed Services Committee, serving as a ranking member of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee, and a member of the Home Committee on Homeland Security. You're the preeminent national leader in the House on securing our nation's technology infrastructure against cyber threats, as you've co-founded the Congressional Cybersecurity Caucus to increase awareness around this issue. We are extremely grateful and safer because of your championing of these issues, and we are looking forward to this important conversation today. So, Congressman, let's just maybe back up a little bit before we start diving into things and share with the audience. Can you share with us a little bit on your background and how you got involved in cybersecurity?
Sure, Eric. First of all, thank you for having me on the program today. I'm looking forward to our discussion. I thought your comments, by the way, were spot on, especially strengthening the cyber and IT ecosystem, especially as we had to scale up and where everyone is now working from home, working virtually. We have a lot of work to do to strengthen that whole ecosystem writ large. But thanks again for the kind words and the introduction. Look forward to our discussion today. So I'll begin by saying I didn't come to Congress with the idea that I'd be involved with cybersecurity policy, let alone leading the effort to strengthen cybersecurity for the entire nation. But here I am. It basically started with back in 2007 when I took the gavel of the Homeland Security Subcommittee on emerging threats that had jurisdiction over cybersecurity. And we started really mainly where we thought we'd be focusing on emerging threats of chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear warfare. Until one afternoon, my staff director told me that I needed to get an urgent classified briefing from a couple of scientists at Idaho National Labs. And at that time, the briefing, they unveiled what is now known as the Aurora Threat, where the scientists showed how inserting some malware into the generator's logic code could cause the generator to spit up out of control and basically blow itself up. And that was the first time for me. It was an eye-opener to see how a cyber attack could actually cause physical harm to infrastructure. And if you could do that at scale, it was going to be significantly dangerous and bad event for the country, and shutting down perhaps a whole sector of the country's electric grid. So after that, we started holding hearings, realizing more and more how unprepared we were for that type of a potential cyber event. From then, I also co-founded and still co-chair the Cybersecurity Caucus in the Congress, as well as having served as one of the co-chairs of the CSIS Commission on Cybersecurity for the 44th presidency. And then we just wrapped up service on the Cyber Solarium Commission, where I had the privilege of serving with 14 members total of the experts in cybersecurity, both in and out of government. But it's been an interesting journey, but a meaningful one.
Well, it's an impressive amount of work in a short amount of time in a very difficult space. You mentioned the Cybersecurity Solarium Commission, and I think you mentioned that you've been there for about a year and a half working on that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the commission and its recommendations?
Yeah, so the Cyber Solarium Commission was created in the FY 2019 National Defense Authorization Act. And basically a 14 member commission. It was very unique in that it had 4 legislators, 4 senior executive branch leaders, including the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Director of the FBI, as well as 6 private sector individuals, all cybersecurity experts in their own right. And we met for about a year to develop a strategic vision for the United States in cyber policy and how better to protect the country from cyber attacks of significant consequence. What we came up with, conclusion, was a policy of layered cyber deterrence. And that basically includes, first, shaping adversary behavior. Second is denying benefits by improving resilience. And then third is imposing costs on enemies or adversaries using all instruments of national power against anyone that would attack us in cyberspace. From the commission, we wrapped up basically our work this past March, issued our final report, and about 80 recommendations, 55 of which were turned into legislative proposals. And a significant number of those right now are making their way through Congress, especially in the National Defense Authorization that we hope to be enacted into law. Among the key recommendations are creating a national cyber director in the executive office of the president that would be Senate confirmed, a really much needed position. It's really a glaring hole in our cyber defense right now, or policy. Next, strengthening the cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency at the Department of Homeland Security agency, and we call that CISA, but that's within DHS. And then finally, improving operational collaboration with critical infrastructure. So those are just some of the highlights, but it was a year well spent. It's the kind of discussion and discourse that really should take place in Congress that doesn't, unfortunately, but it did in this commission, and we had some great give and take, nonpartisan commission, all with the effort of trying to better protect the country in cyberspace.
Yeah, and thank you for, I mean, in a country that's gone through what appears to be a little bit of polarity politically, to be able to drive successfully that kind of volume of laws and policy through successfully speaks wonderfully of the team that's working on it and your leadership. So thank you for that. You mentioned CISA, by the way. They played a key role during this COVID crisis of helping getting the data center industries the essential criteria or the essential business workers as part of our allowing us to work while many areas were in lockdown. So thank you for that and your leadership there. I mean, as I spoke about,
big fan of Chris Krebs and the director of CISA and the work that he and his team are doing there.
Yeah, it was very important to help keep the continuity of the economy going, and so we're very appreciative of that. But we did mention a little bit of the polarity here, and I don't think we can have a conversation with an elected official without having to bring up a little bit about the election and its results, and perhaps maybe you can share some of your perspectives on how you think the election and its outcome will affect how it's affecting and will affect cybersecurity policy moving forward.
Well, one thing I'm very confident of, and I'm excited about the fact that I believe a Biden administration will give much more focus and support to the issue of cybersecurity and better protecting the country in cyberspace. I expect to see more engagement on this issue from the new president. And of course, we in Congress have also outlined several leadership positions in cybersecurity that I'm confident that President Obama will fill with highly qualified people. So looking forward to that. Even as we focus though on cybersecurity, we really need to address an equally large vulnerability in information and the information landscape. We've really, I think, appreciated how difficult it is to protect and build resilience into our country by looking at civics education and also protecting against misinformation and disinformation campaigns that really fuel the deep internal divisions and sow confusion among the American people, among the electorate, and we can't underscore how important it is to build up resilience against that type of thing with instituting better civics education, but also building resilience in digital campaigns and understand building in digital resilience, if you will, into our democracy, so that people understand you can't just rely on one source of information because you saw that on Facebook or something and take that as the sole source, and that's true. You really need to fact check. So we can never defend against foreign cyber threats if we're only fighting amongst ourselves. And so we really need to double down on things like election security, which the House Democrats will do next year. We've already put a down payment on securing our elections infrastructure, but we need to do more. The House Democrats under our leadership have provided several $100 billion to states and municipalities for new equipment, or $1 billion strengthening our voter registration security, voter registration systems. But we also, again, need to build in resilience to our democracy as well.
Yeah, and I think that's just been fantastic as a way of building on where we've come from. I think when we talk about in your background and that you've gone to, ex-Congressman, what would you say your priorities are regarding cybersecurity moving forward?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm hoping that we're going to see a national cyber director created. That's important. And we're on the verge of doing that, and I have high confidence that we'll get it done this Congress. Beyond that, though, we need better cybersecurity metrics. Right now, there isn't a whole lot out there other than kind of a gut check to say, XYZ technology is what we should employ. That's where we should spend our next cybersecurity dollar, and it's going to make us X, factor more secure. So we need that Bureau of Cyber Statistics to help us to better understand that. Also, I look at as a priority, U.S. taking a leading role on the international stage, and make sure that when international policy is being created, that we are leading and not following that effort. It's been kind of a vacuum over the last couple of years with respect to under the current administration. I think that's going to change significantly under the Biden administration. But also, increased role for cybersecurity enablers like ISPs and cloud providers, and really less reliance on DoD for domestic cybersecurity. We really need to strengthen CISA and their inherent capabilities that they have, so that they don't need to have just only reach back to the U.S. Cyber Command for the expertise that they need.
And thank you for that. I think one of the elements associated to what you were talking on the KPIs and the measurements of knowing, do we have effective systems? I think a lot of us, we might use a NIST framework or something based off of CMMI scoring. But how can the private sector partner with government to enhance cyber protections, and especially on our critical infrastructure sectors?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying that without a doubt, we really need the private sector and government to cooperate more closely about the nature of cyber threats. Certainly a Bureau of Cyber Statistics that gathers anonymized information in this area can really help us understand what steps are cost effective to take. And so that makes the business case, if you will, about what to do next. You're right on about CISA, about this framework. I've often said, okay, if everybody adopts this framework, and I would say this to my staff early on, will that make us that much more secure? Are we confident that we can say that? And they say, well, we think so, but we're not really sure, right? So we need to put some fidelity into that, and so we can better understand what's going to be most effective. So again, Bureau of Cyber Statistics, we're going to require buy-in, though, from the private sector. Second, we already have some basic ingredients for protecting critical infrastructure sectors like healthcare and finance. But the government really needs to do a better job at collaborating with the private sector, not just sharing information, but that's one of the things that the findings in the Solarium Commission we propose creating a joint collaborative environment so that we're not just talking about information sharing, but we're putting context to that so that both government and private sector can better understand, what the other side is seeing as a threat and what make it more meaningful. And so we have legislation in the works to codify roles and responsibilities also of the sector risk management agencies to work with their private sectors. And then finally, I guess I'll touch upon that we're working at strengthening cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency, again, the CISA, that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and I as I'm thinking on that, I was kind of reflecting, and I think I'll turn the target or the spotlight on us, but there's a lot of other companies that are represented here in the audience that have a global footprint. And so I was thinking, since we're a global company and we also deal with other governments, what can we do to synergize the security globally?
Yeah, that's a great question because this is not just a U.S. problem. I've said this often. This is an international problem, an international challenge, and we need to work closely with our partners and allies around the world and create a more meaningful cyber ecosystem that is more secure for everyone around the world. And that means, again, we have to really establish these international norms of responsible behavior in cyberspace, and again, that those partnerships are going to be important. So, first of all, we need to support multinational institutions, something we expect to see more of in the Biden administration. The U.S. also needs to set the agenda, unlike GDPR, right, where we're kind of, we kind of followed on that. GDPR, they led. The Europeans were more proactive on managing that, private information and protecting private information than what we were. So we need to be more forward-leaning and work with international partners and have more of a presence in standard-setting bodies around the world. That's something where I think there's been kind of a vacuum in that respect, where we haven't had the United States has not had that kind of presence, and so what's happened is Russia and China have filled that vacuum, that void, and they've led, and the outcome is not always great in that respect. So, we need lots of regulatory harmonization out there too. But first, need to get our domestic house in order, and the information and communications technology supply chain to work, because we need to work with partners and allies and trusted solutions that really provide an alternative to China.
Thank you. I believe I was getting a little bit of paper rub on the mic, but I'm just going to maybe do a slight little pivot on this on global side, but I was just curious on your perspectives. How do we find a balance between ensuring consumer privacy protections and national security interests when it comes to cybersecurity? You named a couple nation states there that often come up in conversation in this regard.
Sure. So first of all, we have to acknowledge that security is really a prerequisite for privacy in the first place. Second, much of the data that we're interested in sharing is not sensitive. The biggest misconception in a lot of ways from information sharing legislation was that we were talking about personally identifiable information, and that's just simply not the case. For example, we need to collect data about cyber attacks against state and local governments and against businesses. Oftentimes, no consumer data is even involved, or else the important data is less granular than the individual records. So we can share information without threatening privacy at all, and protecting individual personal private information data has been a top priority of mine and will continue to be so. And we're not going to let anything go through that's going to jeopardize that. But most of it, we're really not talking about personal information that would even remotely be shared at all. And there are protections in place to make sure that anything is protected and that doesn't happen. Finally, the U.S. has to be clear about abiding by the norms that it sets. So, we remain the most capable nation in cyberspace, but also we need to set an example and by our restraint as well.
Thank you for that. And I mean, I know that topic in alone could take up our whole bandwidth of time, and I'm trying to jump across a lot of broad topic matter, so I apologize if I seem I'm skipping around a little bit. But we talked about in the intro remarks about COVID and some of the conditions that we're working in as perhaps the new norm, and with schools implementing remote learning and people working from home during this pandemic. What investments from your perspective, are needed in our information technology systems and cybersecurity to address the remote workforce and the remote work schooling?
Yeah, so COVID obviously has thrust us all into a whole new world, and working virtually is now the norm, right? So in terms of what more needs to be done, I guess the shorter answer is a lot. State and local governments, I have to say, are particularly hard hit. They've had to surge, and so you look at schools and now how they had to transition immediately to remote learning, and then you have state systems that provide services that were overwhelmed. Unemployment insurance claims, just by way of example, in some states we had people lined up down the block just trying to file an unemployment insurance claim, let alone get an unemployment check yet, and the states were just not ready to handle that surge, and the systems get easily overwhelmed. So we need a lot of work to do there. So basically, we have to invest in a massive pay down, if you will, of the technological debt deficit at the state and local level, and look at what we need to do in terms of state and local IT modernization. First of all, that IT modernization has to be a focus on migrating to the cloud, and then also many existing systems are just so old as to be unsecurable in a lot of ways. So we need to provide resources to update old antiquated IT systems, but then incentivize moving data to the cloud, both at the state and local level. And again, let the cloud providers provide the security that they're expert in, without each state or municipality having to try to defend against a nation state attack, if you will, or intrusion, which is really impossible on their level to do. So those are the things that I would highlight.
Yeah, and I think as we're running to the top of the time slot here for this great live event, I think with one more question, we talked a little bit about on the technology side, and in your last answer there, you talked a little bit about the resources and some of the talent. What are your perspectives on cyber talent and the recruiting pipeline associated with that?
Yeah, so we are really challenged in that respect in growing more cyber talent, and we need more of a focus really at all levels of expertise. On the many, we'd say people who use information technology. So that's everyone, and we have to start really by looking at our K through 12 education system first, so that we're teaching more about technology and building in, of course, cybersecurity right from the get-go. I've often said that we all have a role in cybersecurity, and we need more of like a public information or public awareness campaign to that effect. Almost, I call it a Smokey the Bear campaign for cybersecurity, that only you can prevent cyber attacks. Well, there's a lot of truth to that, right? Don't click on the attachments. Don't download malware onto your systems. Have strong passwords and make sure you're updating your security patches. All of those things. So better public awareness is going to be key. That's for everyone. Now, to the sum, people who basically specialize in information technology, they need a better understanding that they are targets, and there's more integration with CTE programs and operators or maintainers of operational technology. So those people that are working with the technology, the experts, that when they're doing installation of the equipment, like again, operational technology, that they understand that they have a role in securing those systems as they're being installed. And then if you look at the few, if you will, the real cybersecurity experts or specialists. We need to grow the pie itself, not just, for example, competing for a larger slice of the pie on the federal government side. We don't only want to just compete with the private sector to bring in cyber talent. The private sector needs more talent, and government needs more talent. So we need to grow the size of the pie itself. So basically focus on getting people into the pipeline through things like the loan forgiveness programs, or what I like, the CyberCore program that will help pay a student's tuition in their junior, senior year, give them a stipend of $22,500. And then if they go into government, then for a period of 2 years, there would be a payback there of their service, and it would give them a job. But again, they're providing an important service to government. But again, we need to grow this also, this pie for the private sector. But we're also need to work on getting, of course, more instructors out there as well. More incentives for PhDs to stay in academia, and we really have to encourage companies to let employees be professors of practice. So those are the things that I think are most important for, again, building up a more aware population of cybersecurity and what our roles and responsibilities are, but then growing the expertise at the appropriate levels across the spectrum.
No, thank you for that. And Congressman, thank you for sharing with us today. At Digital Realty, the priority of providing a safe and trusted ecosystem, both physically and logically, is the top priority. This spans not only the information technologies, but the operating technologies, or IT and OT. This spans our networks and the pipelines for the data. We are working closely with the government and appreciate the critical infrastructure classification to help ensure the protection of our customers, our partners, and our employees. So Congressman Langevin, we very much appreciate your leadership and expertise, and as well as all your championing in this important area. So thank you for today's conversation. It's been fantastic. It's been an enlightening discussion. We look forward to continuing to closely partner with the government and on cybersecurity moving forward. With that, we will move on to the next part of the agenda for Marketplace Live.
Thanks, Eric. Great job.